Good morning everyone. Today is Sunday the 31st of October 2021 and this is the first in a series of videos documenting the installation of solar panels on our roof. As you can see, we have a semi-detached house. Obviously we own the right hand portion of this building and we are going to get panels installed on both the faces that you see there, on the left and the right hand side of the ridge. So on the smaller portion, the left-hand side, basically above the floodlight that you see, there's space to put 2 panels. And on the right-hand side, the bigger space above the ADT alarm siren, there is space to put 8 panels, all in a landscape orientation. Okay, our house actually faces east to west, so we don't have the most ideal roofs to be able to put solar panels on, but putting panels on the front and the back of the house will still capture enough sunlight to make it a worthwhile project. So as we look at the house, the sun rises from behind the shot. It will go over the top and set more or less directly in front of this angle. So the front of the house faces east. So the east is behind us, west is straight ahead of us, north is to the right hand side, and south, the most ideal location, is to the left hand side. But that south facing roof is owned by the neighbour. This is the rear of our house and it's much easier to put solar panels here because we don't have the ridge in the way. We are compromised a little bit because you can see that we have some skylights there taking up valuable space where solar panels could have gone. We've also got a chimney stack in the middle. It's not actually in use, so we're going to get it removed. And as you can see, our neighbour on the right hand side has a dormer which casts a shadow across our roof. It's currently about 12:30 in the afternoon, and so the sun is coming round on the right hand side, so there is a big shadow, but within the next hour or so some of that shadow will have cleared and then the panels will start to kind of capture as much sunlight as possible. The roof to the left hand side, which is out of shot, is a north facing roof, the one which is facing our neighbour with the kind of more orangey coloured roof tiles. So we're not putting any panels on that roof because the neighbour's dormer compromises the amount of light there, coupled with the fact that it's facing north anyway, which is completely the wrong direction. The calculations by our installation company determined that it is not worthwhile to put it on that north facing roof. So we're just going to go on the front of the house and the back of the house, and that's all we can do. On the back of the house here, there should be enough space to fit 9 panels on. So combined with the front, we're going to have 10. That's a total of 19 panels in this installation. So we're located in northwest London in the UK, and the installers are due to arrive in 8 days' time. As I said in the intro, I'm going to be documenting the installation of solar panels and all the kind of various parts and components that form the equation. And the only reason I'm doing this is because as I was doing my research to try and figure out if it's worthwhile, what are the calculations, what are the brands, which are the best brands, I found that there's just very little useful information out there that I could rely on. Either the other videos there on YouTube are quite short and so they don't go into the level of detail that I'm interested in, or they're quite old, they were produced many years ago, or therefore they're from other markets. So a lot of the videos are from people in the States or people in Australia. And I was trying to find examples of somebody based in northwest London like me, with a roof not in the most ideal location, to see if it was worthwhile. So because I couldn't really find too much information out there, I thought as this project went ahead, I would document bits of it and put it out there, and hopefully it will help you if you're considering getting solar panels on your roof, or if not, if you're just interested, then feel free. We'll go into some level of detail around the various components, or the thought process behind some of the decisions we made on what brands we're going to choose. Feel free to pause the video and read the disclaimer, but the key point here is I'm not an expert in any of these areas. All I'm doing is sharing my understanding and some of the thought process that I went through to kind of come to the decisions I did. I'm not claiming anything I say to be 100% accurate, and if you are thinking of getting your own solar installation, then please seek qualified advice before you go ahead with anything. Some of the brands that we've chosen to use in this project are Trina Solar, who are the manufacturers of the solar panels, Enphase, who's the manufacturer of the microinverters that we're going to be using, and Give Energy, who is the manufacturer of the battery storage system and the inverter which is required for that. These are the three brands that comprise the solar PV installation, but part of our entire project here is to try and harvest the sun's energy to help us offset our energy consumption. So we're also getting an electric car, and so to go with that we're going to be getting a PodPoint EV charger installed. We're obviously getting a electric car manufactured by Audi, and to help be as cost effective as possible we intend to switch our energy provider to Octopus Energy. So the PodPoint EV charger, the car and the Octopus Energy switch is nothing to do with our solar installation, but is part of the whole kind of overall project and forms part of the equation and kind of my thought process around the cost effectiveness of this entire project. So that's why I've included them on this slide. I'm going to go through each of these things in a little bit more detail and show you some pictures and diagrams as we go along and some videos of things going up, but this is kind of a summary of what's going on. So the reason why I think getting solar panels is a good idea is because we use quite a lot of energy in this house every day, roughly 17 kilowatts per day, probably a little bit more. On top of that, the cost of electricity has just doubled for us due to the wholesale prices in the UK going through the roof. On top of that, our electricity consumption is about to dramatically increase because we have this EV car arriving shortly. So I'm sure many of you have heard in the news and all the stories is that it's not that much of a good idea to get solar because the payback is really long, circa 20 years, depending on your exact installation. Well, given that we're getting an EV car, given that the cost of electricity has risen, my calculations tell me that the payback for this project would be somewhere between 7 and 11 years. So that's why I think that's a much more reasonable number, and that's why we've decided to go ahead with this. Going into more detail about some of the equipment that we're using. So first of all, from Trina Solar, we're using the Vertex S DE09.05 solar panels. These panels have an output of 385 watts each, and we have 9 panels going on the rear portion of our roof and 10 on the front, so that makes a total of 19. Then from Enphase, we have their IQ7 Plus microinverters. So with this system, you need one microinverter per panel. So given that we're having 19 solar panels, that means 19 microinverters. And then you also need a gadget called the Enphase Envoy, which is like the communications hub. All the microinverters talk to that hub, and that hub talks to the internet, which then talks to apps, and then you can see what on earth is going on. The next thing we've got is the Give Energy inverter. The only reason that we have this is so that the power can be stored in the battery that we're getting. Now, I'll explain how the system works, but basically the solar panels create DC power. The microinverters from Enphase convert that DC power into AC power. But then if you're getting a battery stores power in DC. So again, you need another inverter to convert the AC back to DC. So that's what this gadget does, right? Put simply, it just converts AC power to DC power. Then, of course, we've got the Give Energy battery. Now, the one we chose was the 8.2 kilowatt battery, which is a huge gadget, a huge device. It has a big footprint, but we thought that getting one of these is probably about right for what I think will produce in the more sunny days in the summer, make the whole project worthwhile. One of the key reasons I chose this brand is because the gadgets look good. They kind of have an Apple style design, and the other key point is that the battery system is expandable. So right now we're getting one, but in the future, if we find that we're generating so much solar that it makes sense to get a second battery, then we can add a second, a third, and a fourth, and a fifth onto this installation. They just daisy chain. As I said before, we are getting an electric car, and so with that car we're getting a PodPoint charger provided by the car manufacturer, and it is specifically a PodPoint Solo Universal 7 kilowatt charger. Okay, this is the untethered type, so that we have to use the cable provided by the car or a cable that we purchase ourselves to plug into this and then plug into the car. The car that we're getting is an Audi Q4 e-tron. You can get whatever electric car you want. The point is that's the one that we've decided to buy. And then after that, there's a couple of things that we're not putting in place at this point in time. One is we wanted to get the My Energy Eddy, and this is a solar power diverter which will divert some of the excess energy that we're producing to heat our hot water. It was supposed to be part of the installation, but at this time there seems to be a shortage of eddies, apparently some sort of kind of manufacturing issue. So what we did is decided to proceed with the solar installation without the eddy so that we save time. Adding on the eddy is something that can be done afterwards. It doesn't really impact the solar installation. The other thing is, as I said before, we intend to switch to Octopus Energy. The reason is their tariffs are PV and EV friendly. So PV means photovoltaics, so basically solar panels, and EV means electric vehicles. So this is the Audi that we've chosen to buy. And the key point with their tariff is that they have a tariff called Octopus Go. So that means in the overnight hours, you can draw energy from the grid at a much cheaper rate than your daytime tariff. And so the advantage here is that we would be able to charge the car up at night time when electricity is cheap. We would be able to charge up the battery if we wanted to when electricity is cheap, and so that it could discharge during the day when electricity is expensive, basically saving us money. In addition to that, we've also got the solar panels producing power. So as the next months go by, I'll share kind of how this whole equation works and whether the sun is producing enough power for us to not need to draw from the grid, or do we need to charge a battery overnight. That will all be revealed in due course. So let's get into a little bit more detail about each of these products. So first of all, why did I go with Trina Solar? Well, I'd never heard of them before, but the company that we've chosen to use for the installation recommended them. And from my point of view, I found that the all black panels were more attractive. I had a hunt around some of the other brands out there, and I found that the power generated per square foot or per square meter on these panels was higher than some of the other ones out there in the market. From my point of view, is we have limited roof space, and for every bit of that, I want to generate as much power as possible. So these ones seem to be the right balance between the cost of the panels and the amount of power that they're generating. The other thing is they have a monocrystalline design. So you have a choice between mono and polycrystalline. I am no expert, I don't understand all the details behind it, but the point is a monocrystalline design is better and generates more power. So that's another reason why we've chosen to go with this panel. As you can see down there, the pros really are the power per square foot, the all black panel, sensible pricing, monocrystalline design, and these panels come with a 10-year warranty. The disadvantages of, I've never really heard of this brand before. This brand comes from a particular country in the world, which a lot of people have concern around at the moment, and they only seem to offer their panels in a single site. So that was really annoying, because you can see from the shape of our roof we have an angled roof, and so having smaller sized panels or triangular shaped panels would really be helpful in terms of trying to maximize the roof space. There don't seem to be many brands out there at all. In fact, I only found one brand when I was doing my research that offered a triangular panel, and it was very expensive, so I just decided to write that off. In terms of half-size panels, so that we can squeeze a few more panels on the roof, again, apparently it doesn't seem to be that cost-effective, and Trina in particular did not offer anything in a different size. So we had to stick with this. But that's pretty much the reasons why we went with Trina. I didn't to me, it's all of a muchness, right? This brand produces this much power, the next brand produces 1% more or 1% less, right? So the price that our installation company gave us, I thought was good value for money for these panels. They recommended them, and they do look really smart. And that's it. Simple as that from my point of view. I'm sure there's more considerations and other considerations that that other people may well have thought of, and that's fair enough. There's only a certain amount of detail that I want to go into, and in your project, if you've got one, you might have different needs, and therefore this panel may or may not be the right one for you. The next thing is the N-phase micro inverters. So why did I choose this brand? Well, first of all, we have quite a lot of panels going on our roof. You can't just put any old system up there. It needs to have the capacity to cope with the amount of power that the panels are generating. So the Enphase system has the ability to do that. And the key thing I liked is what's known as panel level optimization. So that means we can manage the whole system on a panel by panel basis rather than a different way of doing it, which is all the panels in one go. And the key reason I went for this is because, as you can see from our roof, we have shading on the rear from the neighbour's dormer, and on the front of the roof we do have a bit of shading caused by the chimney stack. So what I didn't want is that when one of the panels are in shade, all of the panels then reduce their power output to match the weakest link. I wanted the panels which are in sunshine to be generating the maximum amount of power, and only those panels which are in shade to be compromised. So having a microinverter enables the entire system to do that. The other advantage of using Enphase is from a safety point of view. The alternate way, and I'll go into the other methods, but the alternate way is to have a DC system and then a single inverter inside the house somewhere. So that means you have a lot of high voltage on your roof. With an Enphase system, behind each panel is one of these microinverters, and at that point your DC power generated by the panel is converted into AC power. So it's much safer and a lower voltage. Enphase really believe in their product. They provide a 25-year warranty, which is amazing. Part of my concerns about using microinverters which are positioned behind each panel is if something goes wrong, you basically have to get back on the roof, remove a panel to go and see what's going on. But when they give a 25-year warranty, they really believe in their product and really believe that they're so well made that you're not going to need to go and do that. And with all the panel level monitoring, it basically means you're going to have an app where you can see what on earth is going on. So you can see exactly which panel and which inverter might be causing a problem. The disadvantages here is, like I said, it's mounted behind the panel versus in the loft, so it's not very accessible should there be a problem. And the monitoring, for some reason, only seems to be in 15-minute intervals. Now, if I get into a little bit of detail of the different types of systems and inverters you could possibly choose from. So the first one, the most simplest one, is what's known as a string inverter. So let's say hypothetically you have 10 panels on roof number 1 and you have 10 panels on roof number 2. All those 10 panels on the first roof will be wired together in series. All the 10 panels on the second roof will be wired together in series. And then these two cables will be connected into a single inverter that's located in your loft or somewhere. The advantage of this design is that it's a lot simpler. The inverter is inside your loft in an accessible space, so if there's something wrong with it, you can see what's going on. The disadvantage of this design is that, one, all the panels are wired in series, so they are only going to perform at the ability of the weakest link. So basically the panel in that string, which is producing the least amount of power, every other panel, even if it's able to produce more power because it's got more sunlight, will basically change to match the weakest link. The panels in your second string would do the same thing. So basically you're going to have two strings going on, and the weakest performing panel is in each of those strings is going to determine the output of all of the other panels. So basically, if you have pure sunshine with absolutely no shadows anywhere on your roof at any time of day, no trees, chimneys, neighbours' properties casting a shadow, then this system might work for you because all the panels are going to be working perfectly in exactly the same way, and it's a really simple, straightforward installation. If you have some complications, like I find in real life, life is not as simple as some of the examples, then maybe one of the other options is going to be better for you. So the next option is the same design as above, the string inverter, except what you can do is get these things called optimizers and put them behind each panel. So what that does is allows each panel to work individually. So this way, you're not now tuning every single panel to the weakest link. If one panel casts a shadow or has a shadow cast over it, then that one panel's output is compromised, but all the other panels which are in the sunshine will continue to produce power at their maximum output. Think of it that you've got this kind of series piece of wire, and then you have a bypass. So that if the kind of route A is blocked, then the traffic or the current will flow through this bypass to get around the traffic jam and carry on going. Think of it like that. So that's what an optimizer does. Okay, it just enables you to have your string inverter set up, but squeeze out a little bit more power if you do have a little bit of shade from a chimney or a tree or whatever. But the concept of the design stays the same thing. These are string inverters, panels wired in series, and you're still going to have a single inverter inside your property which converts that DC current into AC current. The third option, and this is the option that we've chosen, is what's known as microinverters. So instead of having a single inverter inside your house in the loft space or wherever, you have miniature ones installed behind every single panel. And a microinverter does the work of an optimizer as well. So not only are you treating each panel individually, and so each panel will produce whatever it's able to without another panel hindering it. The other thing is that the microinverter has whatever technology inside it to try and optimize it. So it's basically trying to squeeze out every last drop of power that it possibly can, so that from your entire array, each panel is working individually, and if one can produce 2% more than the next one, it will do, and you get all that extra power in your house. Now these little bits and pieces, in my view, are what counts, because as I said, we have an east-west facing roof, so we're not facing south. We have shadows cast by various objects, and so that 1 or 2% extra is important to me. And in the couple hours of the day where the neighbour's dormer is casting a shadow on my roof, I don't want every single panel in my array to be impacted by that. I just want those 2 or 3 or 4 panels which have got a shadow to be impacted, and the rest of them to carry on working. So for me, this is the best of the 3 options. It does, of course, cost more. So if you're considering it, you need to kind of do some calculations. In the words of my installer, he said the microinverter system, particularly the M-Phase brand that we happen to have chosen, is the Rolls-Royce of brands out there if you're going for it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but those are his words. The next gadget in our installation is the Give Energy battery and the AC inverter needed to make that work. So why did I choose Give Energy? Because they're a British brand, because their products look good compared to some of the competition, and by my calculations I found it to be good value for money. The key thing here is that the battery storage system is expandable. So in the future, if you decide that you want an additional battery, it can be bolted on. You don't have to kind of change anything. You don't have to buy a different brand. You don't have to kind of undo loads of work that you've already done. You can just get another battery, connect it in, job done. A key thing with the 8.2 kilowatt battery is that it has 100% depth of discharge. That means the full 8.2 kilowatts can be discharged from it and used around your house. Many of the other batteries on the market don't have 100% depth of discharge. So although they store 8.2 kilowatts, you might only be able to use 7 kilowatts or 7.5 kilowatts. So from my point of view, that's a bit pointless, right? So I'm quite pleased that Give Energy have figured out the technology so that you can actually use all the storage that you've actually got. I personally like apps, so Give Energy comes with an app where you can monitor everything that's going on. So that's fantastic. The disadvantages is that the battery weighs 76 kilos. That is an awful lot of weight. And the actual battery is a lot bigger than any of the pictures kind of make out. The other thing is, in order to store energy in the battery, you need an AC-DC inverter. And so because I have N-phase microinverters in my system, this AC-DC inverter seems a bit of a pointless gadget, but something which costs a lot of money, and you need it if you want to use the battery. Otherwise, you can't. You need a method to turn AC current into DC current, which is then stored in the battery. So that's the reason we've got that. It serves no other purpose besides enabling the battery to store energy. Now let's move on to talk about some of the costs and the forecasts on the payback for this entire project. So first of all, let's take a look at our current electricity costs. So we pay a standing charge of £24 pence and a bit per day. So 24 pence times 365 equals £87.66 as our standing charge. That is a fixed cost per year, regardless of whether we actually use any electricity or not. Next, on average, we use 17 kilowatts per day. So multiply that by 365 and we get 6,205 kilowatts of electricity consumed per annum. If I multiply that 6,205 by 20.871 pence, which is our unit rate for electricity at the moment, that means electricity costs us £1,295 a year. If I add 87.66 on top, that means our total cost is £1,382.66 per year. That's the consumption of electricity and the standing charge. Now, because we are getting an electric car, I am taking into account how much money that we spend on diesel. So we drive about 5,000 miles per year in the car. The car that we had averaged about 28 miles per gallon. It's not very good. We live in London and most of the driving we do is city driving. Current fuel price is approximately £1.40 per litre. So if you do the maths, that means we're spending about £1,135 a year on diesel, okay, which is all part of the equation. Now, if I move on to the forecasted costs, 88% of our electric is expected to come from solar. These are not my calculations, these are the calculations provided to me by the solar installation company. I did get 2 or 3 quotes and all of their numbers came out there or thereabouts. Now on the previous page, our electricity consumption for the year was 6,205 kilowatts and 5,460 is supposed to be produced by solar. So that leaves a balance of 745 kilowatts that we would be drawing from the grid. So if I multiply that by our unit rate, that means it's going to cost £155 per year for electricity which we draw from the grid. Add the standing charge on top, that means the total annual cost for electricity is forecasted to be £242.66. Now, if I add the electric car into the equation, so if we do 5,000 miles a year, the car that we've chosen on paper has a range of 316 miles per full charge. But in reality, no electric car achieves its full range. So I have decided that in reality, the car will do about 280 miles on a full charge. The car has an 82 kilowatt hour battery. So that means if I do 5,000 miles a year divided by a 280 mile range, that means I'm going to need to charge the battery 17.85 times. Multiply that by the 82 kilowatts that it's got capacity for. That means I'm going to use 1,464 kilowatts of electricity to power my car for 5,000 miles every year. Okay, if I take that 1,464 kilowatts, multiply it by our unit rate of 20.871 pence, that means we're going to use £305.61 worth of electricity to power our car. So if I add that number together with the 242 from above, that means that we are expecting to spend £548.27 on electricity, which is the sum of how much we anticipate to draw from the grid, given that solar cannot provide everything that our house uses, and the increased consumption of electricity because we're getting a fully electric car. Moving on to some of the capital expenditures for the entire project. So I'm keeping it simple. The company that we chose has given us a price of £13,700 to get everything supplied and fitted. Now that's not the end of it. In reality, nobody has the perfect house where that's the end of the cost. There's always something that you've got to do, some additional cost to kind of prepare. So in our case, I've documented the key things. First of all, our electric meter is under the stairs in the middle of the house. We have an extension on the side. So the solar panels are going on the roof. How do you get cables from the roof down under the stairs? So we had to run ducting under the floor in our extension in order for the cables to be routed through them and reach the meter and the distribution board, which is under our stairs. So the cost to have that done, together with ducting, which can feed the EV cables, which need to get to the front of the house, was £850. Now, these are costs which are unique to us. You may not have this situation in your house, but you might have something else and some sort of equivalent or adjustable cost. That's why I've separated it out here. The next thing is I bought EV cables and ducting and enclosures and bits and pieces for the guy to do the work. So all that stuff cost me about £340. For reasons I won't get into, our house actually had two completely separate incoming supplies, 2 meters, fuse boxes, etc., etc. To take advantage of solar, we need this all wired into one distribution board and just have one incoming supply. So we had an electrician come along to disconnect one of the supplies, and then the stuff which was powered from that supply, reroute it to be powered from the other main incoming supply. So all of that electrical work and the bits and pieces which went with it cost £680. And finally, on our roof, we had that small chimney stack which was redundant. It's not been used in 40 plus years. It was simply there to look good. So we had that removed, and that enabled us to basically get 2 more panels on the roof. So the total cost of the system and all the bits and pieces that we had to have done in our case comes to a grand total of £1,630. Now let's get into the payback calculation. So first of all, our capital expenditure on this project is £1,630. The sun is supposed to provide us 5,460 kilowatts of energy. If I multiply that by our unit rate, that means we are saving £1,140 a year in theory, because the sun is providing that electricity for free. So if I divide the 1,230 divided by the £1,140 saving per year, that means it's going to take 14.23 years to pay off this project. However, there's more to the equation. So because we're getting an electric car, we are now not spending the £1,000 plus on diesel, and instead we're going to be spending £305 on electricity. So that means we're saving a total of £829.39, because we're no longer paying for diesel, but we're paying for electricity. So if I add the £1,140 worth of electricity that we've generated for free from the sun, add it together with the amount of money that we've saved for otherwise paying on diesel with £829.39, that means per year we're saving £1,969.39. So if I do the calculation on the top row again, we have a total project cost of £16,230. Divide it by the savings, both from electricity generation and diesel savings. Basically, divide 16,230 by 1969.39 equals 8.24. So that's 8.24 years is the projected payback period to break even on this project. Now, there's still more to it. This doesn't include the Octopus Go tariff, where we have cheaper energy at night time and it's more expensive during the day. So potentially those kilowatts that I would be purchasing from the grid, I could choose to purchase it at the overnight rate of 5p, charge up my car, charge up my battery, and then during the day, where I happen to be pulling energy from the grid, instead of paying 16p or 25p or whatever it costs for that unit, I am drawing it from my battery, which I charged up at 5p per unit. Now, I haven't included that calculation yet because we haven't switched to Octopus Go, and I don't have any of the numbers of how much that I need to draw based on my system configuration. So when we switch, I'll calculate the numbers and I'll share them with you. But to do a simple calculation here, if you don't include an electric car, the project's going to take 14 or so years for payback. If you include an electric car, it's going to take about 8 years to pay back. Now, I'm sure there's a more scientific way to do this calculation, and you can say, everything's not linear, this, that, or the other, blah, blah, blah. Very true. But to put simply, nobody can measure how much power the sun is going to produce on a given day. So no matter how basic my calculations are, and the fact that somebody might know a smarter way to do these sums, nobody can predict how much power that sun's going to generate on a given day, and therefore the level of precision that you might want to go into, in my view, was not worth the effort of doing, because it's going to be completely wiped out due to the unpredictability of the sun or a cloud being in the way or something like that. So these are my very simple ways of doing the calculation. As I say, this is just for my own benefit. If it helps you get a rough idea of how much your project might cost, then fantastic. Feel free to go and do more complicated calculations if you want to for your own project. Okay, so this video has become a little bit long, going through some slides. The more exciting news is the next few videos will be more focused on pictures and videos of actually what's going on during the installation.